So instead of studying or looking for jobs like a mentally stable person, I decided to spend several months of my life trying to turn cacao pods into chocolate.
Chocolate! Chocolate! Chocolate!
I feel kind of dumb because I told my roommates this whole ordeal would take maybe 2 weeks, but 2 weeks turned into 3 weeks and 3 weeks turned into 3 months, and now I feel goofy. There was a lot of work involved, but I've always been like fascinated with how humans manage to turn something healthy like cacao fruit into something unhealthy like chocolate. So it was a learning experience and it was worth it, I guess. Of course, y'all might be wondering how I did it, so let's get on with the video. So we start off by cracking open our cacao pods. When I pulled the pods apart, I got to the seeds on the inside. The seeds are covered by slimy fruit. Now y'all, I had too much fun playing around with the fruit. Like when I pulled the seeds out of the pod, sometimes they'd make this suctiony slurpy sound and I found that stuff too satisfying. With that said, we know that the fruit is fun to play with, but does it taste good? Sure, but it sure as heck does not taste like chocolate. The flavor gives very much tropical fruit, maybe lychee or star fruit or something like that. Good stuff. Regardless, after I was done playing with the seeds and fruit, it was fermentation time. Usually people might ferment the beans outside in like a sealed cooler, but my area has thick rats, y'all. Like there's a specific trash can outside my apartment and every night when I pass by it, it would be shaking and you could hear squeaks because there were rats inside having dinner. And I just couldn't skip fermentation because that would make the chocolate super bland because fermentation is very important. So that's why I was like, you know what? I just gotta do this inside. So that's why I'm using an instant pot for fermentation in my house, and I pretty much put the beans in the pot and use the pot as an incubator. I let the beans ferment for 2 days, stirring occasionally, and by day 2 the beans smelled like alcohol with notes of vinegar. Which is good because chocolate fermentation naturally produces alcohol at first and then vinegar in the later stages. All that alcohol and vinegar was collecting at the bottom of the pot and the beans were like soaking in that stuff, and apparently that's not good. So I drained the liquid away, and yeah, I tried getting people to drink the chocolate alcohol, but everyone was too scared. That said, to keep the beans dry for the next 5 days of fermentation, I got a little creative and cut some holes at the bottom of a Ziploc bag.
I'm so creative like that.
I put the beans in the bag and liquid dripped from the holes at the bottom of the bag over the next few days. And by day 7, y'all, the beans stank. For a moment, my roommates and I were like, oh my god, maybe I should like not make chocolate. The goal initially was to ferment for just a bit longer, but I couldn't because we had guests coming over, and if they came into my house and it smelled like that, it wouldn't be good.
Why is it already stinking? Oh my goodness! It already stink! Oh my!
I will say though, when I smelled the beans up close, they didn't smell that bad. Like yeah, there was that sour vinegar smell, but underneath that, you could smell like these chocolatey floral notes. And so I was like, oh, even though this looks and smells weird and sounds questionable, the smell up close seemed like a good sign. Also, the color change from off-white to this orangish red color was a sign that fermentation had done its job. To stop fermentation, I moved on to drying. Normally, people would dry the beans outside in the sun, but reminder, if I put my beans outside, I'd probably summon some rats. So what I did was I got my oven and I put it on the lowest setting. It was like 170 degrees Fahrenheit, I think, and I let the beans dry in the oven. I didn't really have an idea of how long this would take, so I kind of just left them in the oven for a while and I fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I was like, oh my god. So I went to the oven and the beans looked black on the outside and I was like, oh my god. Did I just burn my beans? And I was panicking. But then when I cracked the beans open, the inside and the inside of the husk looked golden. So I was like, okay, maybe it looks burnt on the outside, but the inside looks pretty good to me. So I went ahead and roasted the beans at 250 degrees Fahrenheit for maybe 30 minutes, even though they already looked dark on the outside. And the beans had been stinking the night before, but after I dried them and roasted them, the house smelled really good. Like it smelled like freshly baked brownies coming out of the oven, so no more sour vinegar smell. And so after this, I went on to crack the beans open. I could have technically peeled the husk off the beans carefully by hand, but there was a ton of beans and I was really lazy, so I took a cast iron pan and I just smacked the beans. After doing that, I was left with this mixture of crushed cacao nibs, the stuff on the inside of the cacao beans, and the husk, the papery shell on the outside. And I couldn't use this mixture to make chocolate because the husk was still in it, so I removed the husk by using this machine called a winnower. The machine itself is like this bucket with a series of pipes running through it and a vacuum. You pretty much pour the mixture of edible cacao nibs and inedible husks into one of the pipes, and the vacuum blows away all the husk. Eventually, the machine spits out cacao nibs that we're going to grind into chocolate. As a side note, by the way, if you're interested in some of the things that I used in this video, check the links in the description. Anyways, I started off grinding by using my NutriBullet, and I just put the nibs into my NutriBullet and ground them into a fairly fine powder. Everything was fine until my NutriBullet started smoking, so I stopped. The cacao was powdery enough, so I guess everything was fine. I took the powder and went ahead and weighed it out, and I had like around a pound of cacao powder, and like, yeah, that's a lot, I guess, but I started off with maybe 15 or 16 pounds of cacao pods, so this goes to show how resource intensive chocolate can be. The machine that you now see on screen is called a stone grinder. In some parts of India, stone grinders are used to make traditional foods. In my house, we use this machine to make dosas and idlis, but to my surprise, this machine can also be used to grind chocolate. The grinder is made of a metal cylindrical bowl with motorized stone wheels on the inside, and the wheels spin really fast against the bottom of the bowl, and anything you throw into the grinder is just squished and scraped into a paste by the wheels. In my opinion, stone grinding overall is really satisfying to watch, and it's that step that the chocolate really starts to look like something we're familiar with. I started off by pouring the cacao powder into the grinder. I poured it in a little too fast at first, so the grinder got stuck, but with a little poking around, we were back on track. By the 2-hour mark, the chocolate looked like chocolate. The stuff looked smooth and silky, and watching the chocolate glide around the grinder was almost hypnotic. When I went in for a taste though, the stuff was nasty. It was very bitter, and that's because we still needed to add sugar. So I went ahead and added around 200 grams of sugar. That was a little too much, and the chocolate got really thick to the point that the grinder was getting stuck. So I went ahead and added some cacao butter to thin the chocolate out. After that, we were back in the game with some silky smooth chocolate that was ready to be tempered. Tempering itself is a very tedious process, but I honestly do not think y'all are here for a lesson on tempering. Tempering personally made me lose my temper multiple times. It definitely took me a ton of tries, but even then I don't think I was perfect. Just know that you essentially heat and cool the chocolate to various temperatures, and it helps the chocolate look shiny and snap like this. Without tempering, chocolate can be squishy, crumbly, and the surface can have some crazy patterns like this. Tempering chocolate arranges the microscopic crystals in a way that prevents these kinda pretty but unwanted patterns from forming. After tempering, I poured the chocolate into some chocolate bar molds. I just let the bars cool down on my counter for a bit, and once they hardened, it was time for the big reveal. Now, there are plenty of times that I peeled away the mold only to reveal ugly, badly tempered chocolate like this. So when I finally uncovered a decently tempered, not ugly bar, I did shed some tears, y'all, cause I was finally done.
What a beautiful chocolate.
In terms of flavor, I thought the bars were delicious, which is kind of surprising because I usually am not the biggest fan of dark chocolate. You hear people talk about chocolate being fruity, but a lot of the times the bitterness is what I notice before fruitiness. But these bars help me finally understand what it means for a chocolate bar to be fruity, because the fruity notes were always the first thing I noticed in every bite. Maybe the bars tasted even better to me knowing all the hard work I'd put into them. I don't know. With that said, would I ever do this again? I am honestly not sure. I'm sure it'll be a bit less time consuming now that I have some experience under my belt, but I will say that I got a ton of respect for people that work with chocolate. And I hope y'all do too. Next time you eat some chocolate, really think about how much blood, sweat, and tears went into that chocolate, because there was definitely a ton of blood, sweat, and tears involved in making this chocolate and this video too. So please do like, share, and comment if you enjoyed the video. This is my first video ever, y'all, so I would really love y'all support. With that said, y'all take care and see y'all next time.